Chapter 14. It was Christmas Eve and the presents were all set beneath the tree, and the house had been decorated. Natsuki and I were enjoying the vacation, and we even took some time to go visit Yuri in the hospital when she had time to see us. I was able to get Yuri and Natsuki to reconnect, which the doctors, once they realized the nature of the relationship, were somewhat upset due to all that could have gone wrong. However, since they managed to make up and rekindle their friendship, they weren't too angry for long. We were sitting at breakfast when Natsuki had asked me to join her for the Christmas parade in town. "And there'll be food, and rides, and a parade," said Natsuki as she begged for me to join her. I looked at the flyer which said the parade started at 7:30. "Isn't that a little late?" I asked. "I mean, time-wise, sure, it's not that late, but it'll be pretty dark, right?" "I know, but that won't be a problem, I'm sure," she said with pleading eyes. I finally gave in and said, all right. "Yes," she cheered. Natsuki and I went back to eating her pancakes, and the day went on as usual. I went out back to cut wood for tonight's fire, and Natsuki went about taking care of the housework. We'd gotten into a rhythm of sorts where I would do much of the outdoor work, and any work needed around the house, while Natsuki took care of much of the cleaning. We liked cooking together as it gave us extra time together, and it was something that both of us could enjoy. I kissed Natsuki's head at the end of the afternoon, when all the work was done, and we were set to ourselves in the living room. "Shall we head out?" I asked. "Let's," smiled Natsuki. We left the house and made our way downtown, taking time for Natsuki to look at all the Christmas displays and decorations on the way there. We passed a house with a family of snowmen in front. Natsuki paused at that and pulled me in closer. "That one's you," she said with a flat face. "Why, because he's the dad?" I asked. "No, because he looks like a bird brain," she laughed. "Oh yeah, okay, well, that one over there looks like you." "Where? How?" questioned Natsuki, trying to find where I was pointing. "The pet," I said. "You look like a turtle. You're all hard on the outside, but you're soft and warm on the inside." Natsuki blushed as she finally said, "Let's just go." We got to the start of the parade where many had gathered at the sides of the street. I looked down to see Natsuki's gaze fixed elsewhere. I followed her gaze and I saw a large cotton candy machine. "Want a treat?" I asked. Natsuki looked up and nodded. We walked over to where the vendor was and Natsuki placed an order. I grabbed myself a pastry from the same vendor and we walked over to where Natsuki said it would be best. The spot was located somewhere between the third and fourth intersection on the stretch of road used for the parade. Not quite at the start, but far from the end. I sat with her on a bench and sunk my boots into the snow. A familiar face walked down the sidewalk. It was Monica with her mother and father, and Sayori. Sayori's boyfriend was with them too. The group of them greeted us, and we talked for some time before I heard Natsuki say, "Quiet, the music's starting." We all chuckled aside from Natsuki, who was watching eagerly for the parade floats to come. Monica waved goodbye and went along to go join her parents, who had already gone to find themselves a spot. Natsuki wrapped her arms around me as the first float passed by. A group of dancers performing the Nutcracker. Another float passed by, and this one was a choir singing Christmas carols. By the time the parade was coming to an end, Natsuki had eaten her cotton candy and had a cup of hot cocoa. We followed the final float, which was comprised of a family of several who had been performing various instruments, from a flute for the mother to a slide whistle for the youngest. Natsuki watched as the family moved alongside us, and once more clung very tightly to me. It was fairly late by the time we'd made it home, and I started a fire in the stove for us to keep warm by, while Natsuki got ready for bed. She had returned with the throat to put under us, and I got drinks for us both. I hung my pants by the door, as they were quite wet from the snow. Though stripped to my underclothing, it was well warm enough by the fire, and there was no need for anything else. Natsuki did the same, and we settled into the sofa in one another's arms. Chapter 15. I pet her gently as she held me. "Babe," she started. "Yes?" I asked. Natsuki almost never called me babe. "Why can't we have families like everyone else?" she asked. "Well, it just wasn't the path set for us," I replied. "But that can't be it. I mean, you're telling me that something as simple as fate can dictate you and I having lives so different from everyone else's?" "Well, what I am saying is that sometimes you lose $1, but you find 5 when you're looking for it in the grass." I looked her in the eyes as clearly she wasn't quite grasping what I was saying. You may lose something precious, but sometimes that leads to you finding something even greater. "Like?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe our own family." Natsuki looked up at me with a look of brief shock before she turned to worry. "I mean, do you really think I'll be a good mother?" "Well, why wouldn't you?" I asked. "I mean, I've always followed others, either because I had to or because I wanted to. I've never really borne the responsibility of being in charge of others on my own shoulders," she replied. "Teaching is the greatest path to learning. You have to try something new before you can pass it on, right?" I said to her. Natsuki smiled at me and then laid across my lap. "I think you'd be a good father." I pet Natsuki for a second before I replied. "And I know you would be a great mother. You'll succeed in anything you want so long as you put your heart and your mind to it." "You know what I want?" she asked with a sly smile. "I'm not sure," I replied as I grasped her hand. "I want to be a mother," she said. "That would be quite nice." "I mean, I want to be a mother now," she whispered. She removed her shirt, and I looked down on the now almost naked Natsuki and ran my hand down her body. Every curve and protrusion cast long shadows over the rest of her from the fire that was the only thing lighting the room. "I know they're not as big as Yuri's," started Natsuki as she placed her hands over her breasts. "Never mind Yuri's," I dismissed. "I love you just the way you are." I kissed Natsuki deeply, letting her climb on top of me, and I laid back. She removed her bra and straddled my waist. I could feel her on myself before she lifted herself to remove her panties one leg at a time. "I can tell you love my body," she whispered as she watched me pull off my shirt and boxers under her. "Yours tells me all I need to know." I looked over her nude body, and she was so amazing in my eyes. Her beauty was unsurpassed by anyone I had ever seen. I lifted my hand to her breast. "Well, your body shows me all I want to see." She lifted herself, grasping between my legs before lowering herself and moaning. "Yours gives me all I want to feel." I closed my eyes in bliss as Natsuki and I made love for the first time. It just felt right, and whatever nervousness had been within us was gone by the time we'd finished. It was both of our first times. I laid under her, feeling the soft skin of her back as I ran my hand from her shoulders down to her bottom. She fell asleep some time after I'd finished. Both of us were quite exhausted. I couldn't even lift myself to kill the fire. I closed my eyes and let sleep bring my body the rest it desired. When I awoke the next morning, Natsuki was asleep on top of me, but apparently she had brought us a blanket sometime in the night. I kissed her and she pulled herself in closer to me. I wanted to relive the events of last night, but honestly, laying with her there and then, that was something wonderful in its own. Her soft, warm skin and uninhibited body heat made me relish each passing moment. When at last she awoke, she blinked the sleep from her eyes and whispered, "Good morning." "Good morning," I said. "Merry Christmas." Natsuki didn't move for a second before she realized that it was in fact Christmas and jumped off of me to grab a robe. She sat next to the gifts and looked as patiently as she could while still keeping her hands on the boxes. We had a good Christmas that year. Our first one spent together, I say. Then what happened, Papa? Asked the young girl sitting beside me. Well, your mother and I got married. I decided to quit school and we saved up and eventually we moved out here, I reply. And you built this all by yourself, right, Papa? Explains the boy next to me. Sure thing, son. Every log of this house was moved by your mother and I. Now then, I think it's time for you and your sisters to go to bed, okay? I say. Yes, sir, reply the girls. I kiss each goodnight and close the door to their room and make my way out towards mine. I open the door and find Natsuki already in bed. Sure, I didn't tell them the whole story. I never would, not until they're much older, but I like to tell this story around Christmas. I climb into bed with her and kiss her goodnight. She turns out our lamp before we move into our nightly embrace. She's still my Natsuki and I'll always be the husband she needs me to be. To some we might seem like rather young parents, but this is the life that we want. After all she's been through, it was time that she took life's reins into her own hands, away from her father, away from everyone else. As for me, I'm just thankful for my wife, my kids, my home, my land, and most of all, for the little bit of fate that led me from meeting a girl in need to having the life of my dreams. It is, in fact, a Christmas miracle. The end. And that concludes my story of Reader X Natsuki. It was an entire 16 chapters. Like I said, well, actually 15 chapters. But the first novella that I've ever written. And, man, it took me 2 hours and 25 minutes to record this. So I imagine editing this will probably take me 3 to 4 hours. So wish me luck, right? Anyway, without further ado, I hope you've all enjoyed the story, and I hope you have a good morning, a good evening, a good night, or however it is wherever you are. And with that, take care.